In this example, I want to show you how you can use reference lines and some constraints to define and build robust sketches. So right here on the screen, you can see I've got a fully defined sketch, and there's technically nothing wrong with what I have here. However, if you look at it, there's a lot of redundancy, right? If you look at dimensions, like this dimension here is the same as this dimension over here. You got a dimension here, you've got these 90-degree angles everywhere that's defining the shape of what this thing is. You got a couple different holes. They happen to be the same size, but they're dimensioned separately. Right, you've got a couple dimensions like this 1 inch here, this 1 inch here, and there's just a lot of work that's been put into creating this sketch that you really don't need to do. And in fact, if you needed to modify the design later on, it would be a lot of work because you have to go back and modify all these individual dimensions. You can see there's just a ton of dimensions here. We can pretty much design this thing with only a handful of dimensions, and it's going to be way more robust and easier to work with. So let's go ahead and just do a few of the low-hanging fruit right from the beginning. Okay, you got 3-inch dimension here, you got a 3-inch dimension here. Well, instead of dimensioning both sides, why don't we make a dimension or add a constraint that says, hey, how about this line right here? I'm going to hold down shift. I'm going to select this other line over here. Here are my constraints. I can say, hey, let's make these guys equal, right? And as soon as I do that, everything goes back to being fully defined. So I've been defining it only one place, which is this 3 inches here, and it's going to be used on both sides. Okay, you've got all these 90-degree angles here. Like, you know, if I delete that, it's going to make all these other things undefined because it doesn't know what the angle is. But you don't have to type in a specific angle here. What you can do is you can, of course, you can add in, so holding down shift, select a couple different lines, go to constraints, I can say, hey, let's just make these guys perpendicular, right? And so I've replaced an angle with a constraint. Same thing over here, right? Get rid of that one there. And again, we're just going to select a couple different lines, and we can grab the constraints from there, or you can come up here and say, hey, let's make these guys perpendicular. And we're just cleaning it up as we go. Okay, now when you create lines originally, notice over here, I'm just going to create a line. So here's a line, and it's going to be horizontal, right? And if I go to the vertical, notice I automatically get that perpendicularity. It pops up right when it's vertical, right? If you click there, it'll automatically add that in for you. So make sure when you're drawing these type of lines, you're automatically getting these type of constraints added for you. Otherwise, it's going to take you a lot longer time. So I'll do the same thing again if I make a line and I get close to the vertical, but I don't get that little pop-up. I click OK, hey, looks good, but it's like, it looks good, but it really isn't, right? So if you actually dimension this and you say, hey, from here to here, it's actually 88.73, right? So looking good is not necessarily the right answer. Right? You got to make sure you have that perpendicularity, or if you didn't catch it the first time, go back, select those couple different lines, come to the constraints, and then add it in, and now you have that. So definitely want to make sure you're automatically getting these constraints or adding them, so you don't have these robust, or so you don't have these models that have just kind of things that look good but they're not perfect. So we're looking for robust sketches that we can modify and change easily. Okay, same thing up here. Let's go ahead and delete a couple of these guys over here. We don't want those. Let's go ahead and add the constraints in, and you got to select both the lines, and you're going to grab that one right there. A lot easier, okay? The other thing I want to point out is this is symmetrical, right? Everything on the right-hand side is the same as it is on the left-hand side. So, you know, do we need to really do all this work 2 times? Can I just go and grab a line and say, hey, I'm going to snap a center line or a construction line right down the center of this thing, and then just delete half of this. And then once you've got half of it deleted, you can just mirror it over, right? That's probably the best way you could do this design, is just take all of the stuff and just mirror it directly over. The same thing is notice, like, here's the origin way over here. Why don't we have the origin right in the center? That would make a lot more sense by putting the origin there. So let's go ahead and delete these dimensions. Why are we pushing this off to the side? That doesn't make any sense. Let's get rid of those things. Right, and then you have this line that's defining where these things are. And if I release that, now this whole thing's kind of floating, right? So now I can come over here and say, hey, you know, I want to snap that midpoint or that line to the midpoint here, so that I know exactly that I'm on center. I have a plane now going right down the center of my part. Okay. Now, I'm not going to delete half of it and just mirror it for this example, just because I want to show you a few other ones that we can do here. So how about these guys up here, these 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch dimensions, right? Or these guys. Let's delete one of these for sure, grab the other one, select both of those, add a constraint. Let's just make them equal, right? So that way if you change one, let's change it to like 1 inch. they both change, right? If you want to change them back, you're only changing one, and they go back to the way where they were, okay? Dimensions like these up here, right? This line, I could say, hey, instead of making this 90 degrees, I could say, hey, I already know this is perpendicular here. Let's add a constraint here between this line and maybe that line there. Add that perpendicularity. Saves us a lot of time. And start just deleting all these things that are redundant, right? We don't need all these values that are the same, right? So 2 inches here, 2 inches here. Get rid of it, right? And then just start adding some equals, right? So I'm going to hold down Shift, grab a couple of different things, make them equal, right? Over here, this 2-inch dimension here. And if you don't know what's wrong or why it's showing up as like undefined, grab one of these points and try to pull it around. Like, whoa, what happened there? Like that, the whole thing just got messed up. But that's okay, right? We can come up here and say, well, okay, to fix this line, hold down Shift, that line right here, and add that perpendicularity. Now it's there. Now you can see over here we got a little problem. So you can still grab that corner and go, oh, wait, what is happening? This is not right, So same thing over here is, like I could say, I could make that perpendicular, or I could say, hey, let's just say this is a vertical line, right? And then everything fixes itself magically. Look at that. How about 1 inch here, 1 inch here? Instead of doing that, why don't we do something like a line or a center line and snap it together? So I could say like, hey, from here to here, I can snap to that line. I could snap to that line. Then I can define this line and that line, and I can say, hey, I'm going to select both these guys, add a constraint, they're going to be equal, and it says, hey, oh, wait, can't do that because we already have these dimensions. So let's go ahead and delete these other dimensions, right? And I want to get rid of that one as well, right? But now we have it defined. So now I can say this line, hold on, Shift, grab the other one, and make them equal, right? And let's see, what else is going on here? So these, for some reason, aren't collinear, right? So click on this one here, hold down Shift, constraints, and we're going to make those guys collinear, right? And so now everything's fully defined. It's back to being all black sketches, and it's looking good, right? We've got a lot less dimensions. We have a 2-inch dimension here, we have a 3-inch dimension here, we've got a 1 inch and a 1 inch, and which is defining both those holes, and we're defining the size only one time. Now, if you wanted to be even more fancy, like instead of this 1-inch dimension, because it's 2 inches on this side, basically that's in the middle, right? So another way of doing that would be just delete that out of there, grab yourself a line, and I can go from the top to the bottom and snap that in there. And I could say that center point and that line, and we want to put that at the midpoint, which is right down here. So mid-line constraint, right? And just by adding that little line in there, it automatically makes it in the center. And this makes it more robust because, like, look, if I go over here and I change this to 3 inches, it's still in the center, right? If I had the 1-inch dimension, it wouldn't have moved. It would stay 1 inch from the top. And maybe you do want it to be 1 inch from the top. I don't know. It depends on your design. But if you always want that to be centered, this is a lot more robust, right? It's going to always modify and change as needed. Same thing over here. You could say, well, instead of a 1-inch dimension here, you could add another line here and say maybe these couple lines are the same length or something like that. But anyways, the whole point of this video is to show you that there's a lot of ways you can design something, and they're not necessarily right or wrong, but some techniques like using some reference lines or constraints will allow your design to be a lot more robust and easy to change in the future and not so clunky and prone to errors. So anyways, definitely take a look and think about these different methods in your next design.